Hello, and welcome to Vital Perspective. I'm your host, Dr. Marwin, and our guest today is Dr. Lori Rebo, assistant professor at Bradley University, sociologist, and specialist in gender studies. That's important because today we're talking about the recent election. There's a lot of surprises in that election, but perhaps most surprising was the exit poll data that pointed out that women voted for Donald Trump in large numbers, particularly 42% of women. And of that 42%, we see that 53% of white female voters in the country voted for Donald Trump. And we're hoping today to put that in perspective, to ask why, what does that say about the feminist movement, about in general, and other issues surrounding that topic. So we don't have a lot of time. I want to get right into the realities of that. And ask Dr. Rebo, how do you explain that? Why the disparities in terms of women? Also, part of that statistic, 94% of Black women voted for Hillary, 68% of Latina women voted for Hillary, and 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I have to say I was surprised by these numbers and the whole election. Really, I was quite surprised by it. But to put it in a little bit of like a larger context is that women voting for the Republican candidate has been pretty stable, at least over the past 3 or 4 presidential elections. So for instance, women generally in the United States, 43% voted for McCain, 44% voted for Romney, and then 42% for Trump. So actually, like, we could sort of say that he lost a little bit of the women's vote. And I would say that, you know, it surprised, I think, a lot of pundits and political scientists, perhaps, and certainly me as a sociologist, that 42% of women would vote for Trump, given the salacious things that happened even before the latest salacious thing that we found out about. But sort of to think about this, the women's vote has been sort of stable in some ways. It's a matter of, in essence, actually more that white working class men voted in a surprisingly sort of new margin for the Republican candidate, when those white men would normally, or have in the past 3 presidential elections, voted more for the Democratic candidate. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And so you're suggesting that, I mean, if we look across at least the last 3 elections, women's voting trends have been consistent.
Yeah, I mean, it's only sort of varied between, 2 percentage points. So 54% of the women who voted for Hillary, 55% in 2012 for Barack, and then 56% in 2008. So it's stable, but it's interesting how it sort of shifts among the different categories of whether we look at white women or we look at education, intersecting then with gender. We'll see that that again, we're sort of surprised at the shift amongst the high school or the non-college educated. Women were voting in higher numbers for Trump than we expected them to.
Now, did you also point out that there was a shift in men?
Yeah, and it specifically, as President Obama spoke about in his last address, was it Wednesday night or Thursday night?
Wednesday night.
Yeah, he said that we need to be able to think about walking in other people's shoes, including sort of the middle-aged white guy. And so that's really honestly the demographic characteristic that tripped the whole election towards Trump. And remember, I also want to stress that Hillary did win the popular vote. Right? Like, so she still has 2 million plus in her favor.
You raised some interesting points. I think what's challenging for me to understand, even those trends, which were very important in terms of it's white women in general, voting for Republican ticket has been consistent. But I thought that this would be different, given some of the misogynistic things that Mr. Trump said during the campaign, a lot of the sexism that was revealed throughout his entire sort of professional life. I thought that would sway, but it seems that didn't move the needle at all.
Right. And I absolutely think that I understand your surprise. I am surprised, but it probably does then highlight the larger gender issues that women have normalized, or maybe perhaps come to expect this sort of behavior. And remember, you're a sociologist as well. There's like a lot of complex variables going on. So the loss of economic power, the sort of the decline of respect for the elites, whether it's Washington or journalists or intellectuals, and the rise of celebrity. So I think on some level, like the rise of celebrity and Trump has helped to minimize maybe what we would sort of think as an obvious ding to his potential as a candidate. Because he was so well known in the circles that watch TV, they probably thought, oh, well, this guy will shake things up. No matter if he does these other things, he's clearly going to shake things up. Yeah.
And even that surprised me, given the reality that women in general are doing better in this sort of postmodern, post-industrial economy. And so the lure of bringing jobs back, that storylines would have seemed to have played less among women than among men. This idea of bringing back those manufacturing jobs, this idea of even education. Women are doing better, but we still see that they were seduced by this rhetoric of change from Mr. Trump.
Or a return to something, and a return of something that is nostalgic. And for a lot of, heterosexual women, they're also uncomfortable with the loss of economic power that their families and their husbands or their fathers or their brothers have experienced. So maybe it was some sort of solidarity with the economic issues that superseded, I almost used the word Trump, that superseded gender issues.
Well, I have a quote here from a sociologist who argued that what best explained this is a gender political consciousness, lack thereof, of gender political consciousness, and that's an inability to see one's personal inequality and recognize its legitimacy. The notion that having those multiple identities, women of color are able to have that political gender consciousness in a way that white women are not, because they're not struggling with those other identities. Do you buy that?
I actually do. I think that if we want to truly understand the picture, we have to take into account class as well as race, ethnicity as well as gender. I will sort of make a complicated note, though, is that Latino women actually were a bit more generous with Trump than I think people, and certainly than I expected, but certainly when we look at sort of non-white voters, Latino men and women were actually surprisingly more forgiven of Trump's
misogyny, sexism,
and racism, outright, downright sort of racism when it comes to Latinos and Mexicans, than I expected. African American populations were much more likely, and you probably have the statistics too, were like to vote for Hillary Rodham Clinton in like the in the high 90s. And we don't see that for white women, and we don't see that for Latino women and men. I think it was in the 60s.
Yeah, would you sort of capture all that to say that we're in a post-feminist era?
I don't think that we're at a post-feminist era. I think that we're in an era of sort of, that's a really good question, of recalibration. Because I think that I kind of wonder if, and I don't mean to like potentially trash Hillary or blame her, but I do wonder if it were a different woman candidate, what would the results have been, especially against a Trump? Because I do think that Hillary inspires so much either positive or negative feelings that I think that we might have had a slightly different shakeout had there been a different woman.
Okay. I want to take that issue up after the break. I want to stop here for the commercial break, and we'll pick that up on the other side.
Harold's Fish and Chicken. Visit us today for the best food in town. Delivery also available, or dine in for friendly customer service with an enjoyable atmosphere. Harold's Fish and Chicken, serving only the best in quality organic meat. For the bang in your buck, try our combo meals at $9.99. Seafood dinners also starting at $9.99. Try our popular lunch specials Monday through Fridays, fish or chicken, 11 to 3 p.m., only $5.99 with sides. Don't forget to ask about our chicken buckets. Bring the family in for quality service and hospitality for the best food in town. Harold's Fish and Chicken. Dine in or order out. 841 West Main Street in Peoria, Illinois, 61606, next to Fifth Avenue Fashions. Daily hours at 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. 309-839-8466.
Perspectives. We're talking today about the Trump phenomenon and the number of women that opt to vote for Mr. Trump. I'm your host, Dr. Marwin Spiller, and our guest today is Dr. Lori Rebo, and you're tuned in to Vital Perspectives. We were talking before the break about this sort of about Hillary as a candidate, and that's striking because I hear that a lot, and I wonder, is that also the sexism of the country? In that, I mean, Hillary by far, on paper, the most qualified. You can't get really more qualified than that. And I can't help but think that if she were a man with a similar record, would those same questions about trustworthiness, baggage, the activities she inspired, I can't think of any post. Honest, I mean, that's a noble job. I mean, are we holding her to a standard that we're not holding her male companies to?
Yeah, there's plenty of economic as well as political science and sociological studies that show that as sort of a general population, we expect women and hold women to higher accounts, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's about sexuality in the family, and certainly when it comes to politics. So on some level, I think that is endemic of sexist thinking, period. I mean, she undoubtedly had the qualifications. President Obama blatantly said that and said that she was more qualified than he was, and certainly even more than Bill was when he was elected. And yet,
I mean, if she's not good enough,
yeah, and again, I think that there's a complex picture of like what the heck was going on. And I think that there's a general sort of anti-Washington, but also the anti-sort of international viewpoint that because she was Secretary of State and because she traveled to, I don't know how many hundreds, I mean, you know, she traveled to so many countries and she was so well versed and knowledgeable when it comes to international relations. And I think generally the U.S. sort of electorate just wanted to like be more isolationist, and she's not isolationist. She's more hawkish, but she's not isolationist in a way that I think President-elect Trump is.
would you support the notion that her laws represent a larger set of attitudes on the country about gender, women, despite rising levels of education, despite rising social status, professional status, but there's still this sort of undercurrent that there are some jobs that are not important.
I think I struggle with this. because again, I think that Hillary inspired a lot of negative sort of feedback in ways. So I think it's complicated by that picture, and I think that the country knew her more as a very kind of groundbreaking first lady, whether it be in Arkansas or in the United States. That she had a difficult sort of path, and she varied her persona or her identity in order to try to fit whatever sort of politically was necessary for her in her time. And I think that that doesn't go well for Americans. At the same point, I do think that because we continue to see low representations of women elected in the Senate, in the House, in state elections as well, that when we have somewhere between 18 to 24% of women holding elected office throughout the United States, I think that does actually say something about our acceptability of females to hold political office.
Do you think that these issues are of concern to younger women in the same way they were of concern to younger women perhaps 30 or 40 years ago?
I'm not certain, because I have to say my own sort of feminist awareness did not happen until the sort of late 1990s. So I would think that during sort of the rise of second wave of feminism in the 1970s, awareness was high. I do know, and I'm hopeful to see what the turnout will be of the March on Washington for Women in this coming month, to see if there's a rise and a really strong presence and a voice for women's equality, but also not just women's equality, but racial equality and sexual orientation and transgender equality and progressive things like healthcare, family leave. So I'm hopeful that those things matter more to the younger populations, but they clearly didn't turn out. They didn't turn out right in the same numbers that they did for Obama. So on some level, they weren't that inspired. Yeah. First wave feminism is in the United States is thinking more of the suffragette movement, so the push for women to have voting rights in the early teens and 1920s that was achieved, and then there was a level of dormancy, and then also the World War, a lot of different factors, and then the second wave would be the sort of 1970s.
Where are we now? Third wave?
I think, well, there is sort of a third wave that is more inclusive and more sort of reaching out to multiculturalism and as well as paying attention to the issues of the developing countries and global women. That's sort of the third wave. And I think that certainly is part of the discourse, but I think that doesn't necessarily translate to a national voice in terms of the feminist movement in the United States. I think that the third wave is still a growing force, but it's not the dominant force.
Okay. And since you're on this topic, we know that the literature is rich with debate, discussion about black feminism, white feminism, and how that in this movement is down.
Mm-hmm.
Can any of that be explained in terms of why the outcomes were they were, in terms of why black women, Latino women, white women voted so differently in this election? I mean, is it still fair to say that those groups have different interests, and perhaps the feminist umbrella is not big enough for all these groups?
Yeah, I think that again the issue is complex, and as I was sort of thinking and looking over the numbers in terms of how black women voted and Hispanics and whites, and how they intersected differently with education, it's a really complex picture. And I think that unfortunately Hillary Clinton was not necessarily beloved by white women. you know, that there's enough white women out there who expressed a lot of reservations and had very strong opinions against her. And she actually had greater levels of support from women of color.
You think white women punished her more for her real thick skin?
I think that white women, I think that they had a stronger opinion about it. And I think that they certainly are more judgmental about her life than I think that than women of color are. I mean, it's certainly, there's a big gap between white women voting for Hillary and women of color voting for Hillary.
Well, short amount of time we have left, I want to talk about the women that are still out there doing big things. Kellyanne, your thoughts?
I forget at what point she came into the Trump campaign. And I think she has a difficult road. It's a very public road, right? I mean, it's a very public position that she holds. And I wish her luck. And I think that it's good that a woman has sort of broken that glass ceiling in terms of heading up a major political party's candidate for presidency. And I don't mean this to be pessimistic, but it goes in line with what we've seen in terms of economic issues, that women are brought on to be the CFO sometimes in companies that are struggling. And I think that a lot of us thought that Trump's campaign was struggling. There were a number of times, I think, where the pundits thought, okay, this is going nowhere, right?
Yeah.
This is it. And so they brought her in as the last sort of person to try to head up his campaign. But I was just thinking about like the other companies. So there's a woman heading up Yahoo, and that's a company that's struggling. I mean, it was struggling before the data breach. Carly Fiorina was the CEO for HP, and HP was also sort of struggling and trying to figure out where they were in the sort of global tech economy. And then there's a woman heading up GM currently. And GM also has had some issues about its viability after the collapse. So I think that it's great that she was brought in. I think that she has an enormous task, and I will continue to watch how.
So it's not clear that we can say that represents progress. Still.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's
until women are brought
in higher percentages.
Without a crisis.
Right. Without a crisis, perhaps. Yeah. Okay. Not in a sinking ship, which surprisingly, and I'm not sure how much of, again, the result of the election is due to her. I mean, I think it's a complex picture that actually goes far beyond whoever was trying to steer that ship.
Okay. Ivanka.
That's interesting. I have to say that I'm somewhat curious as to how she is treated in the media, and her relationship with her father seems to get a lot of interesting sort of judgments or feedback. And I think that she perhaps actually persuaded some women that it's okay to vote for her father. I think that she was probably potentially powerful, more powerful probably than his wife.
Last but not least, Michelle Obama.
I think she's beloved by everyone. I mean,
what do you think her legacy will be?
Her legacy, I think, is going to be very powerful. I had the lovely opportunity to hear her speak back in Iowa in 2007, and she was speaking for her husband at a small event, and I was just blown away. And I get teary just sort of thinking about it. I think that her legacy will be as powerful, perhaps, as Eleanor Roosevelt.
Do you think we've seen the last of her? Do you think you have
I certainly hope we haven't seen the last of her. I don't know if she'll do. I think Barack has made it clear that she doesn't want anything to do with that. I think that she would be an overwhelmingly popular candidate. But I suspect that she probably wants to spend some quieter time, less public time, being a person again.
You think the country that segment have overcome the negative portrayal of her in the very beginning. Or she certainly didn't have she wasn't welcome on the public stage. There was a lot of negative pushback, characters. You think we beyond that now?
I don't think that we're completely, I don't think for some group, a minority in the United States, I don't think that they have moved beyond that. But I do think that she has served the American people so well and has done so many good things and has so much sort of public support and respect that I think that she's certainly nowhere near the early 2007, 2008 kind of campaigns of sort of hate and racism that happened earlier on. I think that she's very well respected. I'll be interested to see what she does.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. We're fortunately out of time. Not sure what time left. A few more issues discussed, but I thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's fun.
Certainly, we hope you'll come back and see what happens. This new group of women taking the stage. You've been tuned in to Vital Perspectives. Again, I'm your host, Dr. Marwin Spiller, and our guest today has been Dr. Lori Rebo. Thank you.
Gospel Peoria. Tune in Saturday nights at 7:30 on Comcast Cable Channel 22. Watch revealing positive information with various topics, people, and arts. Also, be sure to visit our Gospel Peoria TV Facebook and YouTube channel, where you can watch show segments, information, and updates about the program. That's Gospel Peoria TV on Comcast, Saturdays at 7:30 p.m., Channel 22. Now that's television with an innovative touch.